Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024. I am Dave Biddle, very happy to be joined by Matt Baxendale. Tons of stuff to get into. I really want to talk a lot about running backs today. How are the carries going to be divided between TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins? We think it's going to be basically 50-50 if they both stay healthy. Ryan Day has not been shy about calling this the best running back room in the country. Not that I'm biased or anything. I would have to agree with him. And you still have Dallan Hayden, James Peoples, walk-on TC Caffey. And I love this new running backs coach. Absolutely love this hire with Carlos Locklyn. So we're going to get into all that and more. I also want to get Bax's take on the quarterback situation for the Buckeyes and much more. Before we do that, I'll let you guys know about our awesome sponsor, Factor Meals. Eat stress-free this spring with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian-approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from a weekly menu of 35 options, including popular options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. Also discover more than 60 add-ons every week, like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks, and beverages to help you stay fueled and feel good all day long. What are you waiting for? Get started today and fuel up for your springtime goals. I'll just add, their meals are all good. Everything's good, but I especially love their smoothies. I highly recommend their smoothies. Head to factormeals.com/bucknuts50. Use code bucknuts50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next box. That's code bucknuts50 at factormeals.com/bucknuts50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active. Great deal there from our friends at Factor. All right. Great to talk to my guy Bax. Let's start off, before we answer the question of the day here, how they're going to split up the carries. I mean, Carlos Locklyn might be the most interesting hire in my time covering this team. And I'm old. I've been covering this team for a little over 20 years now. I mean that in a good way. I love his background. I mean, he has got, he was into law enforcement. He also had a federal job that's like undisclosed that he worked for. Sounds like he did some law enforcement for the feds. He worked his way up as a high school coach in the Memphis area. Then he took on off the field jobs at Memphis at the collegiate level, and then Florida State. Worked his way up, was a running backs coach at Western Kentucky for a year, and then just 2 years at Oregon. And stuff he says backs, it's just like, wow. We'll see. The proof will be in the pudding, but it feels like this is an upgrade over Tony Alford and one of the most interesting hires I've ever seen.
Well, yeah, apparently we hired the most interesting man in the world to coach our running backs. He doesn't always coach running backs, but when he does it at an elite level. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I have zero doubt this is an upgrade over Tony Alford. I mean, let's face it, for years we had always been concerned about his recruiting. And, when Benedict Alford made his move to go to Michigan, then this just opens up the opportunity for Ohio State to weaken another one of their conference rivals by taking one of their best position coaches. So, he's got a fascinating backstory. Coming in, there's already a lot of conversation about what running back recruits he's tight with. And at the end of the day, to me, this seems like this is an up-and-comer guy that Ohio State hired away from a school that did not want to lose him, that is a very successful school in their own right. And, to me, it seems like he's going to do a really good job with the talent he has on hand.
Feels like Chip Kelly's hands are all over this because Ryan Day went out and there was some, he interviewed some guy. His phone was blowing up. He was reaching out to people. And Carlos Locklyn was not a name that was initially mentioned. I wonder if Ryan probably had no connection. I don't think Ryan had any previous connection to him. I don't think Chip does either, but Chip obviously follows what's going on at Oregon pretty close, I'm sure, after being there for years. You don't spend that long of a time at a program and do the great things he did there and not still keep close tabs on what's going on there. Plus, Chip was coaching in the Pac-12 against Oregon these last couple of years. So I'm just guessing here. I'll ask Ryan Day about this when we get a chance. Was this Chip Kelly coming to Ryan and being like, hey, you got to check out this Carlos Locklyn dude at Oregon?
Well, I think that's a pretty good assumption, Dave. Like we both said, it doesn't seem like there's any sort of pre-existing relationship that Ryan Day had with him here. A lot of Ryan Day's pre-existing coaching relationship trees are related either to Chip Kelly or to Boston College, where he was at. So at the end of the day, for Ryan Day to bring in a guy from Oregon like this, who really doesn't have a ton of Ohio ties, to me screams that Chip Kelly was like, look, that guy's been doing an awesome job at Oregon. He probably talked to Chip and was like, well, who should we be looking at? Who do I not know that I should know? right? And that's what an elite coach does in a position like Ryan Day, where he's in the catbird seat in terms of coaching jobs in the country. You want to put the best staff you possibly can together. And, if it means you reach out to somebody that you don't know as well, bring them into the fold because of a mutual connection like Chip Kelly, it's just a smart move. So at the end of the day, there were some other names that popped up here and there and didn't take the job for whatever reason or didn't want to leave their alma maters. Here's a guy who has been very mobile, if you will, clearly as a climber. If you look at his track record as a coach, and this is a great move. Whether it's a 5-year move as an assistant, I doubt it. He's not going to be around as long as Tony Alford was. But the thing is when you're a position coach, you shouldn't be sticking around for that long, especially if you're on the upswing in your career. So again, this seems like it's a major upgrade to Ohio State. The guy's going to probably recruit really well. He certainly is inheriting a great running back room to work with. Everything about his track record seems to indicate that this guy is going to be a big success for OSU. So, yeah, I think Chip Kelly was a major part of getting him here.
I can't wait to interview Carlos Locklyn. Just like hearing him, watching some of his interviews. I didn't know anything about him. And the more I hear about him, the more I love. Like, I don't know if I can – I'm sure there is more I can glean now that I think about it. But I've been reading a lot about him. And the more I, research him, so to speak, the more impressed I am. So I just can't wait to interview him. He just seems like, as you said, the most interesting man in the world coaching Ohio State's running backs. All right, let's answer the question of the day. Is it as simple as saying if both these guys stay healthy, TreVeyon and Quinshon, it's basically going to be 50-50? Do you have a feel one guy's going to be more like 60-40? They're obviously going to play a lot. And obviously Dallan is going to get some carries. I don't mean like 60-40, like they're going to get all the carries. So just between those two, how do you see it being divided if they stay healthy?
I think Trey will get a little bit more than Judkins, but I don't think it'll be significantly more. I think if one of them's a hot hand in the game, they are going to go with that hot hand. But I think the intention over the course of the season is likely to try to keep it fairly even. But I do think Trey Henderson's going to get the edge, and not just because he's been here, but I think it's because Ohio State is more familiar with what he can do. I think they see Judkins, they know how good he is. But I think Henderson, in their heads at least right now, is probably going to get a little bit more of the carries, but we're parsing hairs here. I think the general big picture is to try to keep it relatively even. I don't think either of these guys has anything written on them like goal line back or third down back. They're both really good running backs. And, for Trey Henderson, I think he's certainly embracing it because his number one knock on him was he can't make it through a season healthy without missing games. So now that he's got somebody to take some of the load off of him, that'll help him. And then Judkins is coming to a big-time school, a much bigger school than the one he was at. Ole Miss sort of hit the ceiling of what they can do in today's day and age in college football. So coming to Ohio State gives him an opportunity to win a national championship and improve his draft status. So I think it's a win-win for both guys. And at the end of the day, I think they're going to be relatively even.
Yeah, Mike on YouTube, who's getting the ball on 3rd and 2? I mean, Judkins be who I'd give it to. He's not a lot bigger than Trey. I mean, Trey's well put together. Judkins is bigger though. Judkins is 219. Trey's about what?
Who's running better in the game though? Is it 3rd and 2 in the first series of the game, or is it 3rd and 2 in the fourth quarter? And one of the two has been having just a better game. I think that's going to be the actual real-time discussion. It's not like watching, Chop Williams out there and going, he's a bowling ball and small. He's going to get through. Unless one of these guys shows a proclivity for finding the tough yards between the tackles and the other one doesn't, which would surprise me. I think we're more realistically looking at that. They may alternate series. We don't know at this point. I think both are going to play a lot. I think both are going to get the ball on 3rd and 2 a lot this year. So I think it's just a week-to-week judgment call.
Programming note for all of you out there, another series of interviews with Ohio State coaches and players after practice today around 11:15 a.m. We're getting Quinshon Judkins. We're getting Dallan Hayden, TC Caffey. Okay, so we're getting all those guys. We're not getting Carlos Locklyn because he's not in Columbus yet, unfortunately. But we are getting James Laurinaitis, Matt Guerreri, Caleb Downs, Josh Simmons, and Mitch Melton. So it's going to be a nice little series of interviews over at the WAC later today. James Laurinaitis, my goodness. I mean, this is like the least surprising thing in the world to any Bucknutter, right? That he's going out there showing his chops as a recruiter already. Obviously, he's not going to be able to talk about specific recruits, but he can talk in general. And I'm curious to get his take on just how recruiting is going in general, how he feels like it's going. it seems like it's going pretty damn well for them. And again, we're not surprised by that, but it's going to be good talking to all these guys. What a nice list of coaches and players we have today, James. And Matt Guerrieri is a very impressive guy, the new safeties coach.
I think that anybody who is surprised by James Laurinaitis being a prime recruiter right off the bat hasn't been paying attention ever to anything about the sport. Like, if you knew anything about James Laurinaitis going back to when he played, he had coach written all over him. And you and I had talked about this, Dave. We both thought that he was like a defensive Brian Hartline in the making, and the initial returns on him are high. I'm just going to go out and land some high-end guys on defense. I wrote about this in the bucket this week. Our 2025 class right now is so heavily skewed towards top 247 defensive players. Mm-hmm. I think OSU has 3 offensive commitments and like 7 or 8 defensive commitments. And I know that's not all James Laurinaitis, but you can point the finger in that direction a little bit, and say that Laurinaitis has had a very positive impact on bringing in some more of these defensive players. Look, you need those young fire-breathing assistant coaches that can recruit their pants on fire. And that's James Laurinaitis. That's what Hartline did with the wide receivers. And I'm not saying that JL is going to make us, the guy who lands the top 10 linebacker every year like it seems we do at wide receiver. But the reality is just Laurinaitis is absolutely what we needed on the defensive side of the football when it came to recruiting. And then, as for Guerrieri, I mean, he's got a big step to go into as the safeties coach opposite a guy in Tim Walton who's bringing an unbelievable amount of talent. So, I think this is a guy who, if you look at his track record, he's a guy that can bring in talent as well. And I think everybody seems to be pretty high on his coaching ability. So at this point in time, it's nice to have some good new faces on defense when maybe some of the things haven't gone the way we wanted them to the last couple of years. But Laurinaitis long-term looks like an absolute diamond.
This staff that he's put together is crazy. I mean, Chip Kelly's the offensive coordinator. Like, what? Like, if you told us all this would happen, like, everything has just come together. Laurinaitis is linebackers coach. Tim Walton, what he's doing with the secondary, crushing it. Man, it's too bad they only have the number 1 and the number 2 corners in the country committed. It'd be one thing if they were like, because they did a great job landing the 2 kids in Ohio this past cycle. It's one thing, and it's still impressive to land, the 2 top corners in the country, and they're from Ohio, or 2 of the top 5, whatever. To land the top 2 corners in the country, and they're not even from Ohio, that is getting it done. Tim Walton is fantastic.
And to throw in a third top 100 corner just for fun of it.
What's that?
And then you throw in a third top 100 corner just for fun.
Just for the heck of it, yeah. Another high 4-star. And then Brian Hartline might be the best recruiter in the country, period, as far as position coaches. So it's just awesome. And what was I going to ask you next? Oh, yeah, let's get your take on the quarterbacks. And by the way, I agree with you to answer the question about, that I posed to you, how will the running back carries be divided? I'm with you on that. I think it's going to basically be 50-50, and we're going to ride the hot hand. But I have no doubt somebody's going to get banged up, and it's that those type of things are going to work themselves out. But I agree with what you said. All right, I want to get your take. I've talked a lot about the quarterbacks. I'm just going to turn the floor over to you. Your thoughts on – we're, about 2/3 of the way through spring ball now, maybe a little bit more. Your take on the quarterback situation, Bax.
Well, this is a bucket topic for me this past Sunday. The reality is I think all of us expected Will Howard to be the clear, unadulterated number 1 starter by this point in spring, and that hasn't happened. And there's 2 reasons that could be the case. The first reason is Will Howard came in and wasn't as good as we hoped, and they're in a spot like last year where McCord and Brown both did not impress Ryan Day, and we don't have anybody that can really start comfortably the way Ryan Day wants to run the offense. Or, and I think this is more likely, and I'll explain why, Howard's come in and been perfectly good, but Devin Brown has risen to the occasion to really make this a competition. I mean, the simple answer is that, Brown did not back down. I think all of us sort of wrote him off after the disaster Cotton Bowl. And he's come into camp and competed and made it tough on Howard to really jump him. And the reason I think that's what's happening is not just observation or whatever, but the reality is if both of them weren't getting it done, we'd be seeing a lot more Julian Sayin shifting in with some of the ones. We'd be seeing a lot more of these younger guys shifting up in with the ones on reps, and we're not seeing that. It's Howard and Brown. So to me, as of right now, I think that the reason that Howard hasn't claimed that first job is that Brown is doing the old-fashioned college try and really doing his best to hold him off. Now, maybe you see it differently than me, Dave, but I think the reason that we haven't seen it is because I think Brown has been better than we thought he'd be.
Yeah, and I still think there's being too much made of this because we're not seeing everything. We're just seeing, like, even this past Saturday, we saw pretty much all the practice, but there were still a few periods that they had light drills. But so we saw the good stuff on Saturday. That was the one time we've seen the good stuff. But even then, we didn't see the entire practice. There was like 5 periods that before they let the media and the students in. And then the rest of the time, we have not seen anything where they're doing the good stuff. I think too much is made of it. Will Howard, from what I've seen, is accurate within 20 yards. Is he going to be a great thrower of the football way down the field? I don't think so. But he can do it. It's not like he's got a noodle arm. But he's accurate. He's got a quick release. He's got the experience. He's a willing runner. I still think he's going to be the starter. Is that where you're at? Would you still put money down that he will be the starter?
Yeah, that's where I'm at too with this. And I think part of the reason for that too is that he's got that veteran savvy. His running ability is a different dimension that they like having Devin Brown be slightly mobile, but Howard is an actual mobile quarterback. And I think Brown is still a pocket guy that can move. I lean strongly towards it still being Howard. I think that their initial calculus was they were bringing him in to win the job. They were bringing him in to be a one-year stopgap to let everybody else get that experience so that a year from now, all the young guys can really have a free-for-all to try to get that quarterback spot. Whereas if Devin Brown wins the job, then it's more likely to give you a long-term roadblock to some of these more talented younger guys. At the end of the day, Julian Sayin and Aaron Nolan are going to want to be able to compete for that job next year. So to me, there's a lot of reasons why I think it's going to be Howard. But I think the big picture is this is what Ryan Day expected when he brought him in, was that he would start him. And I don't know if he's necessarily going to go off of that unless Devin Brown is just so much better.
We're going to get Bax's thoughts on the offensive line to close the show. Is that still the biggest concern? Is something else the biggest concern? Is Bax not concerned about the O-line? If he is, where's that concern level at? We're going to finish the show talking all things O-line. But again, I want to tell you guys about Manscaped and a really cool thing they're doing. This episode is brought to you by Manscaped. Did you know one man every hour, every day is diagnosed with testicular cancer? In fact, testicular cancer is the most common form of cancer amongst men aged 15 to 35. With April being National Testicular Cancer Awareness Month, our friends over at Manscaped have partnered with the Testicular Cancer Society to help spread awareness for men's health and early cancer detection. Visit manscaped.com/TCS to learn how to check yourself for early signs of cancer. And as always, you can use promo code Bucknuts for 50%, or excuse me, use promo code Bucknuts for 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. Promo code Bucknuts for 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. In addition to providing the right tools and solutions for comfortable and easy grooming, Manscaped is committed to raising awareness and giving support for fighters, survivors, and families impacted by testicular cancer. That's why they will be donating $50,000 to the Testicular Cancer Society. Help save lives and balls by going over to manscaped.com/TCS and sharing their funny, educational check yourself video. And while you're at it, grab 20% off plus free shipping with the code Bucknuts. Because like a famous American philosopher once said, take care of your mentals, your balls, and your chickens. There you go. Really cool thing Manscaped's doing. All right. O-line. Where are you at now, nearing the end of spring ball? Are you feeling good about it? Are you not feeling good about it? If you're not feeling good about it, where is your concern level at?
I'm still not super duper excited, to be real honest. I'm glad to see Luke Montgomery is sort of battling his way into that starting kind of position. The fact that they're sort of talking about whether Fryer is going to be playing right tackle or guard, maybe that's us a little bit hyping it up. To me, I still feel like OSU is going to probably consider another body in the portal at the tackle position. And I know we need to see a little bit more. I'm looking forward to seeing how they do in the spring. But at the end of the day, that's the biggest issue, because we know everywhere else, Dave. We know that we're going to be good at receiver. We know we're going to be good at running back. We have so much talent at tight end that I'm not really worried about it. One of these quarterbacks, if not both, is going to figure it out. There's too many bodies there that are too talented for it not to get figured out. But the O-line was the absolute biggest disaster of the Cotton Bowl. And we've made some improvements. I think McLaughlin at center, certainly over the Cotton Bowl lineup that we put out there. McLaughlin at center is doing a good job. I think the left side of the line, there hasn't been a lot of chatter about that. So if the coaches are actually happy with Simmons, then, I assume he's going to hold on to the job for the year at left tackle. But at right tackle, look, Fryer didn't have a great year last year. Montgomery's coming in and repping at guard. That's nice to see a young guy. We keep hearing about Tegra. I mean, Tegra was a top 40 player, and you'd like to see him trying to force his way onto the field. And this is sort of his time to try to do so. So I want to see him in the spring game. I want to see more of Tegra. But at the end of the day, this is the only position group that has to prove it to me. Like they're going to be my automatic number one concern from now until the season starts, because I need to see them do it after the way the last game was so bad. I mean, that was one of the worst O-line performances in modern Ohio State history. And that is a big concern. We're only changing one body from that game right now. Right? I guess two if Montgomery comes in. That's two then. But we're still bringing back.
Well, the biggest, tell me if you agree with this. The biggest thing in the Cotton Bowl was Matt Jones playing center, which he hadn't played. And he wasn't good, but he was better than Vamahi. Vamahi was just terrible. Fryer wasn't good, but then all of a sudden Fryer has to worry about having Vamahi next to him. I thought Simmons and Jackson didn't play great, but I'm not worried about them. But Vamahi being out there, that was a disaster.
That was a guy who was not ready to be able to succeed in the position they put him in. And they tried getting Matt Jones film at center, and all that did was prove on film he can't play center. So that really didn't help him. That's the problem there. To me, I am glad to have McLaughlin in. I think Luke Montgomery, look, today he's only 6'4", which puts him more in guard size than tackle size, which is fine. And this is a super talented young guy. So I hope he can turn out to be the right guard we're looking for. But Fryer was only okay last year too. If Tegra's not going to be pushing him for that job, I won't be surprised if OSU goes out and grabs somebody and moves Fryer to the inside guard position. I just won't be surprised if that happens. So, yeah, I mean, and it's also the number one concern by default too. Dave, there's nothing major on the team that stands out that you go, oh no, what are we going to do? Right? Every other position group, it's like, well, you could be worried a little bit about the linebackers because we lost two starters, but to me, there's some obvious solutions staring right at you there. There's a ton of talent. There's guys that have played a little bit. You feel okay about that. And they're not coming off of a performance where, legitimately that was the worst I've seen in Ohio State offensive line play in at least a decade. So we need to see more. And they're going to be my number one concern by default, unless somebody gets hurt, God forbid, at any of the positions that we're comfortable in.
I wasn't even going to talk basketball on the show, but several of our, esteemed listeners, viewers, like Asian Paw Storeen, reminding me, I was psyched about this when this came down. We'd heard this was going to happen. Michi Johnson is coming home, baby, for his fifth and final year. Michi, 2 years at Ohio State, the last 2 years at South Carolina, played pretty well, and now it's coming back. I love that. And they still have more work to do in the portal. They need to land at least two more good players, but I love getting Michi back to Columbus backs.
Well, this is the Diebler effect, right? Michi left, didn't think he was developing under Holtman, and now he's coming back after being South Carolina's leading scorer last year, and they were a tournament team. So, good for him. I'm glad he went off and was able to, find himself and find his game. And, this is a credit to Ohio State now that they can bring a guy like that back. It shows you the NIL guys are not sleeping when it comes to hoops. And I think a lot of us are optimistic about what we're going to see going forward with the hoops program after the way Diebler had the team going on a run late. So, bringing in a guy like Michi's a good start. It sucks to lose Scotty Middleton, but you understand there's family stuff back home he's got to handle. At the end of the day, you got Akpara coming back. You got Michi coming in. I'm sure Ohio State will land somebody else who can be an impact guy for them. The reality is that this should be a top 20 job, right? I've always told people that we don't look at Ohio State basketball like you look at the, UCLA basketball or Kansas basketball, but it should be that next tier. It should be that group that's always good, that's always in the tournament. And frankly, with the horsepower we have at NIL in Columbus, the fact that we're the biggest game in town of a city of 2 million, Ohio State is in a unique position compared to most of their other college rivals where, hey, you can find an urban college, but you can't find an urban college that doesn't have like the NFL. or NBA teams. You know, UCLA has to deal with multiple NBA and NFL teams. They're not the biggest game in LA. You know, Minnesota is in the middle of Minneapolis, St. Paul, but they care more about the Vikings and the Minnesota Wild up there than they do about college hockey or basketball or football or whatever. In Columbus, the only school I can compare to us in terms of this situation is University of Texas at Austin, where Austin doesn't really have a pro sport. They have UT football, right? And that is sort of the only real comparable that I can think of where somebody should have the horsepower in NIL like Ohio State does. So I'm glad to see it's being utilized from a basketball perspective. I hope it continues to be utilized from a basketball perspective so that Diebler can continue to keep running in his job as the hoops coach at Ohio State. And having Michi Johnson come back shows that there's a commitment to more than just being good at football.
Damn right. Great stuff from Bax. You can catch his column every Sunday. It is the award-winning Bucket. Thanks again to Matt Baxendale. Thanks to all of you. We really appreciate all the comments and just appreciate you guys tuning in for the show. Everyone. Oh, and by the way, don't forget, again, big day of interviews about 11:15 a.m. Keep it locked to Bucknuts for that. James Laurinaitis, Matt Guerreri, a bunch of players like Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs, dudes you've heard of. So keep it locked to Bucknuts for that. Thanks again to Bax. Thanks to all of you. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Go Bucs.